Anything?
Nothing definitive, but we must remain vigilant. The night is not something we can afford to underestimate.
Samantha's boots whispered against the cool, damp concrete as she led the way through the dimly lit corridors of the back rooms. The monotony of yellowed walls stretched endlessly around them, the omnipresent buzz of fluorescent lights clawing at the edges of her sanity. Dr. Oliver Lancaster followed close behind, his eyes scanning the shadows where secrets and knowledge lurked like old friends, or foes just beyond his reach.
Keep your eyes peeled.
Iris's piercing green gaze missed nothing, her every muscle tensed for action. She moved with a survivor's grace, as if the very air around her could betray their presence to hidden threats. The trio advanced, each step measured and deliberate amidst the rubble-strewn floor. They were a tapestry of determination, woven together by necessity, yet frayed at the edges due to the ever-present threat that stalked these infinite chambers. Samantha felt the weight of leadership heavy on her shoulders. It was her plan, her promise of escape that had brought them here. As they turned a corner, the corridor ahead seemed to stretch into oblivion, the madness of mono-yellow pressing in from all sides. Samantha's throat tightened, but she pushed down the claustrophobia, focusing instead on the task at hand. Before Samantha could respond, a low growl reverberated through the hallway, an ominous sound that seemed both everywhere and nowhere. It was a whisper of dread that turned into a shout, freezing them in their tracks. The sound clawed at their nerves, rooting them to the spot as their hearts pounded in unison against the cage of their ribs. Dr. Lancaster's face paled, his charismatic mask slipping for a moment to reveal a flicker of genuine fear before he composed himself. Iris's hand went instinctively to the makeshift weapon at her belt, her body coiled like a spring, ready to strike or flee. Samantha's breath caught in her chest, her thoughts racing. Was this the night making itself known? An entity rumored to be more abstract than any organism, potentially taking the form of the very location they sought to escape. A living labyrinth with a hunger for those who dared to trespass within its domain. Their survival hinged on a single moment of decision. Samantha locked eyes with her companions, the silent understanding passing between them. Whatever lurked in the oppressive atmosphere of the backrooms, they would face it together.
Stay close.
She took a tentative step forward, the growl still echoing in her ears as they continued their perilous journey through the endless expanse of the backrooms. In the pallid light of the backrooms, Samantha's gaze latched onto the sliver of darkness where a door stood slightly open. With a swift motion, she gestured to Dr. Lancaster and Iris, her hand slicing through the stale air towards the refuge. The growl reverberated once more, a sinister rumble that seemed to crawl along the walls, and in a fluid movement, they slipped through the gap like shadows, fleeing the light. The room was a pocket of silence, a void where even the ever-present hum of the fluorescent lights seemed muted. Here, the stench of dampness was overwhelming, clinging to their nostrils as they pressed themselves against the cool concrete wall, barely daring to breathe. Samantha's heart thudded against her ribs, a drumbeat syncing with the tense silence. Dr. Lancaster's eyes met hers. There was a wordless exchange, an affirmation of their collective resolve not to succumb to the fear that clawed at the edges of their minds. Iris, her green eyes fierce embers in the gloom, nodded with a grim determination that spoke volumes of her survivalist tenacity. The heavy footsteps outside drew closer, a cacophony of dread that threatened to engulf them in its unseen presence. Yet, as suddenly as it had arrived, the sound began to diminish, each step retreating as if the creature were being drawn away by some unseen force, or perhaps its own capricious whims. They waited, counting the seconds, until the last echo of the entity's passage had faded into nothingness. Samantha exhaled slowly, her breath a ghost in the cold air. They exchanged relieved glances, a silent symphony of shared relief and unspoken understanding. Dr. Lancaster's lips quirked in a brief semblance of a smile, the charismatic veneer finding its way back to his features despite the lingering threat. Iris's grip on her weapon eased, though her posture remained alert, every muscle coiled and ready for action.
Time to move.
She stepped forward, leading them from the temporary sanctuary, the decision to press on as inevitable as the labyrinthine nature of the backrooms itself. Outside, the corridor stretched before them, both familiar and foreign, as if the night had reshaped the very fabric of their surroundings while they hid. With a silent nod, they continued their escape attempt, each step a defiance against the abstract horror that stalked their every move. Samantha slipped through the door first, her eyes piercing the dim light for any flicker of movement, any hint of the abstract terror they called the night. The air was thick with the hum of fluorescent lights, the omnipresent buzz a backdrop to their fraught silence. The corridor stretched ahead, its monotony broken only by the occasional door, all closed, all silent. Dr. Lancaster followed, his gaze sweeping over the expanse of monochrome yellow, watching for the subtle warping of reality that might herald their pursuer. His hand brushed against a wall, feeling the cool dampness of concrete bricks beneath his fingertips, a grounding gesture amid the surreal landscape of the backrooms. Iris brought up the rear, her senses tuned to the slightest deviation in the pattern of their environment. She knew too well how quickly safety could dissolve into peril here, how the walls themselves could become a predator. Every shadow was suspect, every stretch of emptiness a potential trap. They moved swiftly, their footsteps muffled by the musty carpet, each breath a quiet storm within them. It was a dance of survival. One misstep could be catastrophic, a truth etched deep into their bones. Ahead, a flickering light caught Samantha's attention. It was like the pulse of a beacon amidst the dreariness, erratic yet beckoning. Her heart quickened. Hope surged through her veins, raw and urgent. She raised her hand, motioning to the others without a word. Dr. Lancaster's brow rose in acknowledgement, his scientist mind already calculating the risks and benefits of this new variable. Iris, ever the survivalist, hesitated for a fraction of a second, long enough to confirm the absence of immediate threat, and then nodded sharply. Together, they hastened towards the uncertain promise of escape, the unreliable light a siren call in the oppressive vastness. With each step, the flicker grew steadier, as if recognizing their plight and responding in kind. Samantha felt the pull of it, the need to escape this living location that seemed to breathe malice through its very walls. The backrooms had tormented them enough. It was time to reclaim their right to the world beyond its grasp.
Almost there.
But they heard the determination in her voice, saw it in the set of her jaw, and followed her lead. Their adrenaline became a shared rhythm, a collective pulse driving them forward as the flickering light awaited, an enigmatic portal to freedom, or perhaps another deceit. With a flicker of determination igniting in her chest, she wrenched it free from the wall's grip. The presence loomed just beyond her hideaway, an oppressive darkness that seemed to suck the very light from the air. It was there, but not there. A shadow with substance, hungering for them amidst the hum-buzz of fluorescent lights. Samantha, as S1, gripping the pipe with both hands, she swung her arm back and then forward with all her might. The pipe sailed through the air, end over end, before crashing against the distant concrete with a resounding clang. It tumbled along the floor, clattering and echoing down the corridor like a siren's call. For a moment, everything was still. Then the creature shifted, the ambient sounds warping as it turned its inscrutable attention toward the noise. The entity, ever enigmatic, seemed to stretch and distend as if contemplating the source of the disturbance. Its form was a paradox, a silhouette cut from reality itself, and now it was drawn away from them, ensnared by the diversion. Samantha, as S1. From the corner of her eye, she saw Dr. Lancaster slip from his hiding spot, his movements deliberate and silent. He caught her gaze for a split second, nodding almost imperceptibly. Iris, emerging from her own concealment, gave a brief hand signal, readiness etched in the set of her shoulders. The other two members of their group, the older who had shared his food and the younger man who seemed to be with him, were both nowhere to be seen. As sad as the loss made them, Samantha, the doctor, and Iris understood their time was short and they must move. And now was their chance. Samantha, as S1. She extended her arm, 3 fingers pointing towards the flickering light at the corridor's end. It beckoned them with the promise of escape, a beacon amidst the monotonous yellow and gray. Their eyes met and held, the unspoken agreement clear. They moved as one, quiet as the secrets Dr. Lancaster kept so well, nimble as Iris's instincts demanded. Together, they slipped from their respective shadows, coalescing into a unit once more. Their footsteps were a whisper on the matted carpet as they navigated a rubble-strewn path. Each member of the trio knew the stakes and understood the gravity of their plight within these confining walls. The flickering light ahead was their North Star, guiding them, a sliver of hope in the face of the unknowable horror that hunted them. It was in this ephemeral glow they placed their trust, allowing it to lead them closer to the fragile dream of freedom. Adrenaline surged through Samantha's veins as she led the charge down the corridor, the unreliable flicker of light their only guide. Dr. Lancaster's heavy breathing was audible just behind her. Iris's quiet steps were nearly silent but equally hurried. The oppressive darkness seemed to press in on them from all sides, and the air grew colder with every desperate stride they took. Samantha's mind raced almost as fast as her feet. The night, a term that barely did justice to the amorphous predator now stalking them, was an enigma wrapped in whispers. It was said to be part location, part entity, its formless hunger stretching across the labyrinthine expanse of the Backrooms. And it was gaining on them, Dr. Oliver Lancaster as S2, faster! His usually composed tone edged with urgency. Iris, ever the survivor, skimmed the walls with her peripheral vision, her body coiled like a spring, ready for any threat. The light ahead stuttered one final time before holding steady, revealing an ordinary-looking wall sconce. But Samantha knew better. There was nothing ordinary about this place. Samantha remembered the old stories, the rumors of hidden switches and secret doors that could appear like phantoms in this realm. With only moments to spare, she slammed her palm against the wall beneath the sconce, her fingers finding the hidden switch by instinct more than sight. A soft click resounded in the silence, and a section of the wall shuddered, then swung inward with a reluctant creak. Samantha yelled, "Go, go, go!" She pushed Dr. Lancaster ahead of her. He stumbled through the doorway, his usual grace abandoned in favor of survival. Iris followed, casting one last wary glance over her shoulder at the darkness that seemed to thrum with the pulse of the night. As Samantha crossed the threshold, the light above them stabilized into a steady glow, sealing the hidden door behind them with a definitive thud. They stood for a moment in the new space, catching their breath, the echo of their flight still ringing in their ears. The night remained on the other side, its predatory essence left clawing at the barrier they had put between themselves and it. For now, they were safe. A fleeting concept in the Backrooms, but alive. Alive and one step closer to whatever semblance of an exit existed in this place that defied reality. Samantha exchanged looks with her companions, their eyes reflecting the same wild mix of fear and triumph. They had outsmarted the unexplainable once again, but for how long none of them could say. Samantha's hand found the uneven wall, fingertips tracing the grooves as she stepped forward into the narrow staircase. The hidden door clicked shut behind them, its sound swallowed by the thick shadows that loomed above. She turned to Dr. Lancaster and Iris, their faces ghostly in the half-light, and nodded sharply. A silent pact forged in the urgency of survival. Up. Her voice a whisper against the ominous quiet that pressed in from all sides. Dr. Lancaster adjusted his glasses with a steadying breath, the glint of his scholarly curiosity not quite extinguished by their harrowing flight. His charismatic facade had slipped during their scramble through the Backrooms' labyrinthine passages, but now, as they faced the ascent, that enigmatic composure seemed to reassert itself. Dr. Oliver Lancaster whispered, "One step at a time." He mused, almost to himself, though his eyes remained vigilant, darting between shadows as if deciphering the darkness itself. Iris, ever the sentinel, scanned the stairwell with piercing green eyes. Her hand rested on the hilt of a makeshift weapon, her instincts honed by countless encounters with unseen threats. There was no room for error, not with the night lurking just beyond perception, an entity defined by whispers and the fear it sowed. As they climbed, the staircase seemed to constrict around them, the air growing cooler with each rise of the steps. Samantha could feel the oppressive atmosphere receding, replaced by something else, an intangible thread of hope that beckoned them onward. Iris said, "Feels like we're leaving one world for another," her voice carrying a note of wonder that belied her usual stoicism. "Perhaps we are. There are forces at play here, ancient and inexplicable, like the gods."